Hi everyone, this is the WildFly community curl for February 19th. The first is the community announcement. We have released WildFly 3901. Rado, since you did the release, do you want to have a few words about it?
Yes, definitely. So 3901 is released. It was quite a lot of work. So this was first time me coordinating this one. So all the releases are available for people. I would recommend going to the GitHub releases where we publish all the notes that are both like code, that have code, and also references to Jira issues. And I would like to definitely, as I did in the blog post, highlight the work of our community because it's pretty amazing. So Ruan found a memory leak issue that I think has been in WildFly for a couple of releases. Fortunately, it was one of the memory leak issue that didn't increase in size. It was only after deployment. So it was very helpful in investigating the issue and verifying the fix. And also Cody reported an issue with Undertow, whether we were copying the postmax size to 2 megabytes because it wasn't properly being applied from the configuration from Undertow. So again, excellent work on the community reporting this early and getting these fixes in. I've also heard, maybe just a reminder to our community users, I have seen on, I think it was on Stack Overflow, people are running into some of the issues. I think this was in XML bind library. But if people find issues, we make sure they somehow communicate to us, bring this up to our attention so that we can actually fix this in micro releases. I think that's about it. So definitely everyone should upgrade, give it a try, and let us know if they have any feedback on the release. And thanks everyone who was involved. It was quite a lot of work, and it was quite a few long weekend evenings trying to debug certain operating issues that appeared on certain operating systems that we enjoy dearly. So maybe I should mention, yes, I should just mention one more thing, right? So we fixed the CVE that was in Elytron, which didn't actually limit number of authentication attempts, and so that CVE is now fixed in this release. So definitely there's a CVE fix in here as well. Sorry, Jeff?
From my own experience, the first release that you are doing is always the most complex, so the other one will be pretty smooth for you, I think.
Yeah, well, hopefully this won't be for another, I don't know, 2 years, or how big is the cycle?
Okay, thanks, Rado.
Just quickly, I'll just inform people about how things work, because people don't know. Is we kind of have a rotation. I forget how many people, maybe 6 or 7 people that do micro releases, and then we just kind of go through a rotation so people aren't overburdened by having to do them, because they are a lot of work and it's very much appreciated, the people who do them. So thank you, Rado, for stepping up and doing it.
My pleasure.
And if you enjoy that, Rado, I can give you my turn.
Well, not that much pleasure, but
okay. Then Brian, you wanted to discuss the WildFly 40 schedule?
Yes. So one of the things, I'm always a bit delayed on doing this. I should have probably done it several weeks ago, but just today I'm planning to send out to WildFly dev list. It's been in the calendar, but I always should send out an email. Basically telling people what the schedule is for WildFly 40. And I mean, I'm not going to go through all the dates here, but you can see that a little over a month, March 25th, that's the key date, the PR due date. That's basically the date when we want to have all the new features. We want to have mergeable PRs ready for all the new features that are going to go into WildFly 40. So that's really the key date on all this stuff for people. And then after that, we release the beta about a week later, and then 2 weeks later, we do the final. That's our standard practice. So it's looking, mid-April is when we're looking to have WildFly 40 out.
Yeah. Something that might not be clear is that we want to have features ready for the beta. So the real feature freeze is for the beta, not for the final. So March 25 is definitely the dates to keep in mind.
Yep.
Thanks. And I've also linked to the calendar where you have put the same information.
Yeah, we always, I think the calendar has like dates out for like a year maybe. And if not, I'll add more. At this point, there comes a point around now where we make sure, yeah, the people have to do work. Is this early stage really going to work? And that's kind of happened now. So yeah, it was more firm.
Thanks. Then, James, you wanted to discuss some stuff you did around testing for WildFly?
Yeah, basically, I created this WildFly Testing Tools project just in WildFly Extras to basically boot a WildFly server and run tests against it, or be able to control starting and stopping a WildFly server. You know, it's in some ways it's similar to Archillion, but it's definitely not a replacement for Archillion. I want to be very clear about that, because you can never do it. I'm never gonna do anything like in container testing or any of that kind of thing. It's just for controlling the life cycle of WildFly and running tests against it. It originally came out because I needed some kind of JUnit 6 based thing for the WildFly Maven plugin. And if we ever migrate WildFly itself and WildFly core into from JUnit 4 to JUnit 6, we're going to need something in WildFly core, and I believe this would work for that. Because basically all it does is just, again, start and stop a WildFly server, and it allows you to manually control that as well. It's all annotation based as well. So it's fairly easy to use, and it's basically separated into 3 different tools. There's the one tool that's based a simple API that we may or may not ever use in WildFly. I personally use it in REST-easy for being able to decide whether to run a test or not. Like, there's a fix that might be in a specific version of WildFly, but it does not work in older versions of WildFly because it was a bug fix. So I can basically use a annotation called @requires module that will simply just ignore that test, or ignore that test. And there's some other useful annotations potentially in there as well. And there's also a JUnit extension, which is the one I was kind of describing earlier, which is basically just, that's the one that controls the life cycle of WildFly itself, and just uses the WildFly plugin tools as well to basically use the server manager to be able to start or stop the server manually if you'd like, or you can just have it do its own thing and never touch the server manager. And then the third tool is basically just some utilities that are just helpful for like creating modules, or creating deployment descriptors, like just very minor ones, nothing like you're not creating a full-on deployment descriptor, but you create like a permissions schema or something, or a permissions .xml or something like that. And that's basically it.
And you control the life cycle of WildFly, but can you modify WildFly? For example, we have some test setup where we are changing some extensions, some subsystem to run a test. Can you do that with your tool, or is it something that is Archillion's?
Yeah, you could. I didn't add anything like the server setup task type of thing. One of the utilities in the server manager itself is the ability to execute commands and be able to reload a server and things like that. So really, what I left it as is you can do it in a before class or before each type of method, and after each and after class type of annotation. So it's really meant to be more in the JUnit lifecycle than have something special plugged in.
So I have a project where I'm using the WildFly Maven plugin to provision the server. So basically, from a test perspective, I'm treating WildFly and my deployment as a black box, and I just want to test through its REST API. I was using Archillion just to control the cycle of WildFly, but I was running all my tests as clients, so I was not using any deployment thing. So I could switch to using this tool just to do that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it works with JUnit 5 or JUnit 6. I tried to be fairly thorough on the documentation, so if anybody sees anything, let me know and we can fix it, because there definitely should be some examples in there, and then obviously the tests in there too. I could hopefully maybe at some point write a blog post about it would probably be good too, or a guide or something. Maybe not a guide because that's an extra. So.
That's interesting. Eduardo, I don't think is on the call, but some of the change he did for the WildFly Quick Start is to run every test as a client. So basically treating WildFly as a black box. So that means that for that, we don't need Arquadian. We could just use your tools to control the WildFly lifecycle.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and you can do, like, there's two different annotations to kind of like indicate what kind of test it is. There's like the at WildFly test and at WildFly domain test. So, and you cannot annotate the same test with both annotations. So you can either do domain or standalone. And they also, I added one thing to those where they actually add a tag to the test itself automatically. So you can easily filter those out, which is what I do in the test suite for that. So like I have all the test suite together, except I have different executions for domain, different executions and Surefire for that. And I don't have to go add my own tag to every test or anything like that. I just annotate it with one annotation and the rest is just there for me.
Okay. Thanks, James.
Yes, I see, James, that you mentioned parallelization, right? So this is always problematic if you have things that configure the server state, and in certain conditions that will be different for the other tests. So can we do something smart about this in this project? So when we know, so enable parallelization by default, but when we know that we're actually changing some of the state, then revert back to like a single, like a single node, like a single thread execution. Like in this architecture, do you think that would be somehow possible?
Not without changes, right? Because there's nothing in the extension itself that allows you to configure the server, right? It's all done via the JUnit stuff. So like it's going to run in a before class or before each method to be able to execute operations to update things. So there's no way for the extension itself to know that that's what's happening.
Yeah, okay. So we would need to somehow communicate to the extension, right? Like, oh, like this runs on vanilla configuration, so it can run in parallel or something.
Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess in a theory, you could scan tests and see if that annotation or one of those methods exists, but then you're just going to block and wait for other tests. I don't know that it's worth it, to be honest. I can appreciate the fact that parallelizing tests or parallelism for tests is good, but it's just really complicated to do. If you don't change anything, it would work, right? Because you just start the server once, tests run, because deployments can happen in parallel and everything. But once you have to make changes to the server,
then
it makes it
a revert to a single.
Yeah.
It's also like if you have, I don't know, like complicated like clustering tests like we do in WildFly,
Yes.
right? Like nodes are going, down and up during the test, so you can't really do that very well.
Yeah, exactly.
But it would definitely, and also we kind of did look into this in Arquadian last year, and I think we ended up with more questions than answers.
Yeah,
it's definitely not easy, definitely not trivial, because there's certain, this how Arquadian works. Events are being fired, and they somehow need to be handled in a way that the things are happening in the right order, and
right.
It wasn't an obvious fix that we could just do, right? Because it was also a community user who tried to like make certain collections concurrent and was hoping to enable concurrent execution in Arquadian, but that's definitely not the right way to go about it. So I was wondering, if Arquadian is a little bit more complicated, maybe with this we can maybe do some progress in here.
Yeah,
I mean, running concurrent tests is saving time, so you have faster turnaround, you have higher velocity, and you're saving CI resources, right? So the value is definitely there.
Yeah, I mean, it just depends. It depends on how much time we really want to invest in this tool as part of it, right? Like, I mean, this is supposed to be something that's fairly simple, just to I needed it for one thing. I felt, okay, this could probably be used in core if we ever want to migrate to JUnit 6 or 5 or 6 there. And, it could be used elsewhere as well. So, it was just basically like a night and weekend project that I just threw together fairly quick because I had I mean, I think I spent more time on documentation than actually like writing anything else. Because I have something very similar for for Jakarta REST too, where if you only need a REST endpoint, you could use the SE Bootstrap to like boot up a quick REST server for testing. And then I just kind of took that idea and moved it here. With and one other thing to mention too, I forgot, is the other two tools that this little testing tools has, like the what I call the JUnit API, which is the annotations that kind of send hints to JUnit to skip tests or do various things. That can be used with Archillion. Like there's nothing explicit about that needs to be used here. It can be used with any WildFly and installation with JUnit 5 or 6. And the same with the other one that just like creates deployment descriptors and modules, stuff like that. That's really designed to work with modules and shrink wrap. Really, that could be used anywhere.
Okay. Thanks, James. Any other questions? Okay, thanks. Next item on the agenda is a feature pack for WildFly around A2A. Do you want to talk about that, Rodolphe?
Yeah, so definitely. So James started talking about weekend projects. So it's time to present my weekend project. So basically my weekend plans fall apart, and I was like, let's give a look into this A2A. It's been on my list. I was looking at it, the way that we have sort of been working on stuff, especially Kabir mainly, where he was integrating A2A with Jakarta servers. The way that it's being deployed, like you need to add the A2A dependencies to the project. So I just thought it would be interesting to come up with a feature pack. So, but I guess let's back up a little bit. Maybe not everybody's up to date with what A2A is about, right? So A2A is agent-to-agent communication protocol. So this is a standard, and as you know, WildFly is based on standards. We love to implement standards, and this is a protocol to enable universal interoperability between AI agents. So this way you can very simply put WildFly into the A2A ecosystem, and it can serve both as a client or as a server, providing the agentic services to other servers. So this is really just a proof of concept implementation at this point. I think Jeff put it here if people have interest to have a look at it, this just makes it quite easy to provision this into your server and sort of get started. So I've updated the instructions a little bit today, so it's easier for people to build. And also for us, going forward, we need to make sure that all the other things like the gRPC layers and stuff work with this. Although I think, James, there's a pin in that, right? Because James is redoing the gRPC integration for WildFly in a slightly different way. But definitely, we invite people to have a look at it. Jeff, do you want to mention a little bit more about this A2A strategy, maybe?
I'm not sure about that. I think we are still kind of trying to figure out how it fits. We have different initiatives around AI. There was the MCP integration. There was the Chain4j thing that we did. I think right now we have some different initiatives, and I think yours bridge the gap between what was done in A2A and what could be done within WildFly. I think it's interesting from a WildFly perspective to see how we are using feature packs to kind of coalesce together different functionalities to create applications. Because if you were doing a real agents thing with WildFly, you would also use the gRPC feature pack and maybe the AI feature pack to talk to an LLM. So we can see the kind of the combination of functionalities from within WildFly from different feature packs. Part of the question with what you have been doing is how does we want to, if we want to put that as a community project within WildFly organization, how does that relate to the AI feature pack we have in terms of maintaining and supporting that for the community? I think it's too early to discuss that now. It's more, let's explore that, what we can do with that.
But basically, the sort of the current idea is that feature packs can sort of depend on each other, right? So this can be incorporated into the other one. We can even move the code, and more. Kind of my argument for like separate repositories that are implementing separate things is that A2A is going rapid development at the moment, right? So it's rapidly changing, and it has a completely different life cycle from all the other components. You might need these other components, but they have completely different life cycles. So that's why I think it's a better fit to manage it like this. I guess maybe we can talk about this a little bit more because if we decide to like invest a little bit time into this, I think it would be beneficial to actually see some of the, because currently this repository is the feature pack plus the TCK tests and plus a generic test suite for Jakarta servers. What would be useful, I think, for users is having a sort of demo. Maybe we can use Emmanuel's like A2A weather application and try to incorporate it in this feature pack so that people actually can see how to actually build an A2A application. So I think that will be much more useful to users if they actually see how they can actually use this.
And I think it's important, to keep in mind that you can do two things with A2A. You can write a client that will connect to an agent or wrap an agent within WildFly, and making sure that the two are quite correspond to two different use cases. So we should have examples for that. Going back to your point, I think we can also, usually we have feature packs that are self-contained and also provide in the same project the resources that they provide. So the feature pack of WildFly is in the same code than the WildFly extensions, but it does not have to be like that. You could have the extension for A2A at its own pace and deliver that with the AI feature pack on a different release cycle. And I think we have never, unless I'm mistaken, Brian, but we don't have the guidelines, that a feature pack and its resources should be inside the same thing from the code perspective.
Actually, quite the contrary. Well, first off, your basic point of, we haven't really worked this through so it's really smooth and everybody knows what to do. But definitely we have cases where, what is it? Not MCP, MVC, sorry. Jakarta MVC is, that's actually part of WildFly, but it's actually the contents are coming from another code base. So, okay. So that can happen for sure, but it's not smooth, and it can definitely be made smoother how to manage that kind of thing. So there's definitely a lot of room for improvement.
Okay. Yeah, and I think also we need to maybe a little bit better understand the sort of the life cycles of the feature packs and on WildFly itself. Those are independent, right? I think people like to sort of tie them in, and maybe we should be a little bit have a little bit more communication about what works with what, right? And so if WildFly has certain cadence of releases, but maybe A2A and all of these rapidly evolving specifications, they have much higher cadence. So we kind of need to be able to adapt, right? And so this will probably move a little bit faster than WildFly itself. So it will still be compatible, right? Which is, people need to maybe get used to it, of just upgrading the feature pack sort of independently of WildFly version.
But part of that is what Jean-François did with Galeon family and criteria. Instead, of saying that a feature pack should depend on a specific version of WildFly, it just says, I need to have a WildFly that supports Jakarta E10. And so, that means that you are decoupling the release of the feature pack from the release of WildFly. So I think we already are moving in that direction, but we should continue to make that clearer mostly for the developers of feature packs.
And I know that people hate me for telling people reminders, but I think this is a pretty good reminder when you're coding something to maybe not use the deprecated stuff, because that's actually going away. And if you're using something in WildFly from WildFly core that's going away, you might be depending on something, but the classes might get removed that you actually want. So the sooner people move from deprecated stuff, the better chances they have of being compatible, forward compatible.
Yeah, that's really important, because we had many years where essentially you had WildFly core and full WildFly. And within our heads, we could kind of keep track of, okay, who's using this dependency that we're going to get rid of? And okay, now it's time to remove it. Who are we going to break? And we know because we could go look in one code base and find them all. But with a bunch of feature packs, you know, if you're using old stuff, there's a high chance you're going to end up getting broken because somebody's going to forget to check with you before we remove something.
Yeah, so definitely use WildFly subsystem when developing anything, right? Because that's sort of the latest and greatest. So that's what we want people to use.
That's something I was working on, updating our Maven archetypes to use the right API to do subsystems. I need to finish that so that we can have, you know, some common ground to show for people that would create new feature packs like you, or with the help of generative AI. Thanks, Frodo.
Kind of related. I have no idea. This isn't really about what Rado's done because I haven't looked at it. I have no idea. But just a general point for when people do this kind of thing, you know, new feature packs being developed, I really strongly encourage you to like use experimental or preview stability right out of the gate. Put in the stability stuff in your code, because if you don't, your code is essentially default stability. And then you have to, if we ever want to bring it into something official in WildFly, we have to retrofit it, and anybody using it is broken because they can't use it at default. Well, that's just a general point for people writing new feature packs. You know, from the start, use the stability levels and make it a lower level.
Yeah.
So
And then
do
you
you
can
the stability level of like the feature pack itself, or
the feature pack and the features, because if the stability of a WildFly process is global. There's no such thing as, oh, this part is allowed to run at preview and that part is allowed to run at default. It doesn't work that way. So if you introduce some feature pack and everything's at default stability, or you can't. Well, sorry. If the WildFly server says only default stability is allowed, then I'm sorry, I'm not being coherent. But anyways, if you don't get to pick and choose and say, okay, my stuff is default stability, so Mr. User, you're okay with this part being preview stability and that part is not. That's not the way the server works. It's a global decision by the user what they're going to allow. So that's the point. And you know, we can't bring things into the main WildFly ecosystem at default stability unless we've validated that it's okay. So let us bring in new stuff at preview and let our users use it at preview.
Yeah, but basically, if you don't want to do the work to move that to experimental, it's a gate that you won't be able to cross before going to the WildFly ecosystem. So it's much better to do that sooner rather than later.
Yeah, and for sure, if your users are using your thing at default stability, but it's really not because it hasn't been qualified, and then we see no, you have to fix it. You have to bring it down to the proper stability. That next release, your users are going to be broken.
Yes.
So you don't want to do that to your users, to yourself or to your users.
I guess I'm still not clear about the difference between like the feature pack and the code itself, right? Because if you bring the feature pack at experimental stability, like you can't even like provision it, right? If you know, you can't even start the server, I think, right? If you don't match the stability.
You can standard WildFly. You cannot start a server when typically standard WildFly allows you to provision experimental stability stuff. Like if you're using the WildFly feature pack and it has experimental stability stuff, it'll provision. There's no problem. There's no limitation. For example, EAP, for example, not to get into it too much, but that won't. You can't provision things that are less than default stability. Right. But when you start the server, standard WildFly, if you don't use a stability flag when you start the server, it's only going to allow you to use management API stuff that's at community or higher. So yes, if you've added a new feature package that has a bunch of previous stability stuff, the user is going to have to set their server to use it, correct? If they're using base standard WildFly. I mean, that is a downside. To use your stuff, people have to do an extra step to use lower stability stuff. Hopefully that makes
So-
sense.
First thing we will do on your weekend project, Rado, is to open an issue to make it experimental.
Yeah, so
Well,
it is.
and by the way, I think well, I mean, it's up to people, but preview, experimental, you know, the experimental is kind of difficult. So it really depends on what the author of the feature thinks. I don't think you should need to obsess too much about that distinction, but at least preview so people are understanding that it's preview. It's a
To be fair to me, Rado, it's not something that you must do now. But if we want to take what you have done and bring that into WildFly, at that point, we would have to make that experimental.
Yeah, I
You
mean,
know, we should
we're
not
in the
enforce
POC
that
state,
for
right?
prototypes, things like that. But it's a good reminder that it's part of what needs to be done to move that into the WildFly organization.
Yeah, and if it goes long, it's another form of technical debt. If you don't do it, you're accumulating technical debt that will have to be paid. Yeah.
Yeah, so I made experimental like the feature packs themselves, right? But so if I understand correctly, Brian's saying like all the resources should be experimental as well. And
Yeah, and I forget. I have to think about it. What kind of? I mean, it might be sufficient to. You might be able to. I forget the details, but you might be able to control at the extension level. In other words, you might not have to put 100 pieces of code in order to make this happen. You might be able to do it at a very high level.
exactly.
Yes. Yeah. It's the whole extension that you provide that is experimental, not some attributes of it.
That makes it. So hopefully it's not super painful if you're not dealing with a bunch of. You don't have to deal with a bunch of low-level details in order to make that switch. By the way, I'm not advocating for experimental versus preview. I think preview is kind of okay.
Okay.
So, by the way, extension interface by itself implements feature, and feature has stability. So I guess that's possible.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's the way it's supposed to be. I just haven't personally dealt with it in long enough that I'm not willing to confidently say that's the way it's going to work, but that is how I understand it.
So it looks like, Brian, you're not experimenting enough.
Okay. I think the next item is for you, Brian, right?
Yeah, this is just a discussion about this is kind of a detailed stuff about what we want to do. This is about RC25 support, which we're making a lot of great progress on qualifying SC25, so it becomes our recommended version. And when we get to there, we want to start testing our PRs. By the time we do that, we definitely want to be able to test PRs on SC25 so we can detect problems early. So I kind of sent a WildFly dev post to discuss that. I can't link to it. Sorry, the website isn't working. But anyways, the TLDR is, a background is, CI is a scarce resource. We don't want to be just adding 20 new jobs or whatever. So typically, anytime we have this kind of new SE version, there's always like, well, what do we really need? How can we trade something for something else and get the coverage without like adding 100 new tests or so what I'm proposing, we have one job, Linux micro profile JDK 17, and what that does is it runs chunks of the standard test suite, but instead of using standalone XML, it uses standalone micro profile, which was kind of useful in like 2019, 2020. But I can't remember the last time that test detected some problem that, actual real code problem wasn't detected by some other test. So I mean, I'm just proposing we take that job and stop running it on PRs and instead just add a normal SC25 job. And for WildFly Core, there's a job that basically runs WildFly Preview. It builds WildFly Core, integrates it, and then runs the WildFly Preview test suite. And what I'm suggesting there is we change that job. So instead of running on SC21, it runs on SC25. So that adds coverage there. And then also, when that job runs, it builds core, but it doesn't test core. It doesn't run the core test suite. But that would mean there's nothing testing that PR against the core test suite at SC25. So I would just change the step that builds core but doesn't test to actually also test. So That's kind of proposal. The downside to it, I mean, both of these things actually add more testing. You know, the full Linux job that runs more tests than the Linux microprofile. So there actually is more jobs being run or tests being run. So there's an increase of load.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but we have a nightly job that tests GDK 25 and that is passing. So if the PR stays with 25, they must be fixed, right?
Yes. Yes, for sure.
Okay.
I haven't checked. I mean, one problem with nightly job is, you kind of randomly check them. And of course we check them a lot before releases, but yeah, we've been passing the SE25 tests since WildFly 38. So, and that is something, we say when I release WildFly 38, the release, and I talk about SE support, and I say that we do this, we pass these. And I did the same for 39. So we cannot, we're not allowed to regress that. It's not okay. We're already past the point where it's okay to have the test suite failing.
That's especially important for PRs that are component upgrades.
Yeah.
Do you have an idea if we would be able to recommend Java 25 for WildFly 40?
Yeah, I was actually tempted to maybe make this a bigger subtopic, but
okay.
Okay, we'll see about time, and but it seems like we have enough time, and I see the parking lot item is relevant.
Yeah, but that's the follow-up I wanted to discuss. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's three things that go into making an SE release a recommended release. One is that we passed the whole WildFly test suite cleanly, which we've already been achieving that part since WildFly 38. Another is, I'll put a link in here. We actually have a spreadsheet where we just list the key components of WildFly, and we basically, the various component leads go check with the projects that are involved and look into how they're testing SE25. How much confidence do we have that those components work well on SE25 based on their own work? And we've made really great progress on that. It's mostly done, and I think the pieces that aren't done are stuff that we know that it's really heavily tested in WildFly already, so the odds that there's problems are pretty low. The third piece is we try to use the Jakarta EE TCK as a huge test suite. And that part is still on, and for that to work, we're going to have to use the E11 TCK because the E10 TCK doesn't really work on SE25. So that part is still in progress, and it kind of relates to our general SE or E11 support. So I'm confident we can have the first two pieces done for WildFly 40. The third piece, the E11 TCK part, we'll see. That's more tied to our general support for E11, whether that will be done. I can say that the parts of the TCK that we're running, we run them with SE25, and they work as well as SE21 does. I mean, there's a few tests that fail because they don't work right on SE25, but it has nothing to do with WildFly. It's a problem in the test. So the part that we're doing is fine. There's just more parts that we have to run.
Yeah, this relates to what Jean-François has been doing. He has started to produce snapshots of our container image for 25 and UB9. And I think we quickly say that we won't publish them and make them available in our container registry until WildFly recommends to use Java 25. But the key thing is that there's also, other derived release like the M charts, the Maven archetypes, where we want to enable 25, either just as in the CI pipeline or as parts of the release themselves. So just making sure that when we think that we are ready to do that for a WildFly release, we can coordinate that for the derived release related to that WildFly. Yes, yeah. Sorry, it's not support, it's recommend.
No, it's okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point because first off, it's definitely good to start adding any pipelines we have start adding SE if they're not already running SE25 testing, to start adding it, because then we're definitely far enough along where that makes sense. But yeah, I think when we last bumped our recommended, I recall we decided we did not want to start pushing the container images until it was recommended. Right, and I think that makes sense. It's people are going to look at the catalog and they're not going to understand recommended versus, this is good to kick the tires with. So I think it makes sense not to push those until that is the recommended one.
Yeah, because Jean-François, maybe I'm wrong, so please correct me. But part of that was also making sure that we are using the right UB version for 25. So we are at 9, but we are also talking about moving to UB 10 for our JDK. So that's also part of the discussions for the containers.
Yeah, that in the past, I think it was for 21. It can appear that the CKit modules we depend on are only available in the OpenJDK repository for a given UBI. And in this case, we have JDK 25 for UBI 9. So I think there is no reason to move to UBI 10 because we have the proper JDK and all our other images are on UBI 9. So we will, But yes, when the new JDK arrives, we have to look at what is the impact on UBI.
Okay. Thank you, Jean-François. Actually, I will move that part to the 25 discussions. That would be better. Anything else that people want to discuss or mention? Okay. In that case, we can keep the meeting a bit shorter. Thanks, everybody, for joining. Thanks, Rado and James, for your discussions. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.